This is Dr. Latasha McElwain. This is discussion week 3, counselor burnout, just an overview. So this right here is going to be just a video, audio, just to give you information about kind of what happens when counselors struggle and kind of deal with burnout. The week 3 discussion question is, when faced with symptoms of burnout and or compassion fatigue, what supports would you seek in communicating with your clinical supervisor? So basically, this question is basically asking, what are some of the things that you feel that would be helpful when you're talking to your clinical supervisor in this scenario to try to help alleviate, work through or deal with counselor burnout or even compassion fatigue. So going further into taking a deep dive into what goes on, a lot of times with counselors, human services providers, social workers, we kind of tend to deal with a lot of hearing a lot of stories. Sometimes we think about it as vicarious trauma. But we're hearing a lot of stories about what happened in individuals' lives, whether it be adults, kids, the elderly population, adolescents. We're hearing about different things every day about what goes on in individuals' lives, which contribute to our compassion fatigue concerns. And we start to feel a little overwhelmed by a lot of things that we're hearing. Therefore, becoming at a point where we can get burnt out. So a lot of times I tell everyone putting in or even considering talking to your clinical supervisor about a self-care plan is going to be real important, considering the fact that, you're going to feel stressed. You're going to feel a lot coming back on you. You could even feel someone else's trauma based on the stories that they're telling you. You're going to deal with the fact that sometimes you may not have enough time to deal with things. So time management is a big concern sometimes. You're going to also deal with the fact that sometimes you're not in a good place in what's going on in your house or what's going on in your life at that particular time. So always think about, considering, speaking with your clinical supervisor about things you can do to create a self-care plan, things that you can do to start to make sure you're taking a mental health day or taking some downtime, even if it's a half a day off from work or it's a full day off from work or a week or whatever the case may be, to make sure that you are able to reset and be able to rejuvenate. So a lot of times when we're talking about counselor burnout and compassion fatigue, you have to consider having some communication with your clinical supervisor, mentor, whomever you kind of look up to when you're thinking about, okay, taking care of me. Those are the things that you have to do. Sometimes even having a conversation with your doctor. What would be good to implement into your self-care plan to make sure that you're okay dealing with so much stressors and different things coming from your current career, are parts of what you do in your career. You definitely want to make sure you come up with a self-care plan. With that, just thinking about how you communicate with your clients can be a way of being proactive in making sure that you are communicating with them on a regular basis, but communicating with them with the aspect of therapy or case management, whatever you're doing with them, and then allowing yourself to have a little bit of a break time where communication is actually being done by a third party, like the office administrative personnel for certain things that they may need or have questions about. If there's a person that's there that's helping with discharge planning, maybe someone else can speak to them about discharge and things of that nature, and resources in the community and things of that nature. So just being able to delegate certain things that you don't have to be there for every single conversation. I know when I was in private practice, one of the things I had was an office person that administrative person that was like case management for me. And they did a lot of course, scheduling the appointments. They did a lot of, if they called in, they spoke to them directly first. They didn't handle any of the clinical stuff for the most part. All that came to me. But when it came down to resources and thoughts about different things, those thoughts about different things would come to me. Resources, me and the person that I had working there would communicate with me what the concern is about the resources and things like that. We will come up with a great resource list, and then my person will call them back and give them more information. So you got to think about, being able to delegate certain things that can be done by someone else, if you're in that situation or that scenario. Another thing to think about is make sure you manage your time well, as far as when you have a session, you start it at the time it's supposed to start and it ends at a certain time, and making sure that you're kind of sticking to that. I know sometimes I have a colleague that'll tell me, oh, when you're in therapy, your consumers will drop the bomb 5 minutes before the session ends. If they drop the bomb 5 minutes before the session ends, great. Go ahead and accept the bomb, but also let them know that we're going to have to talk about this more next week. This is not something that's going to keep our session moving on for another 5 or 10 minutes. So, just being, conscientious of things like that. Definitely being conscientious again, with your timing, with your availability, and making sure that you're setting time for a lunch break during your day, and make sure you're definitely putting out there that you are going to take a walk around the building for lunch. You're going to walk away from your desk, setting those boundaries with yourself, and making sure that you're actually leaving, and not necessarily leaving to do hustle and bustle things, but leaving to be a little bit more mindful, a little bit more peaceful in your time that you're, utilizing to, rejuvenate yourself to come back in and finish the rest of the day. So, a lot of those things, I think a lot of the feelings that we get, sometimes we feel just tired. Sometimes we feel just guilty. Sometimes we feel overwhelmed. Sometimes we feel worried. Sometimes, again, like I said, we had a vicarious trauma. Sometimes we're feeling like we're doing so much and we can't catch up. So it's a lot that happens to us that gives us sign that we're burned out. We get tired, we get sleepy. We just don't want to do any notes after hours, or whatever the case may be, whenever we set up to do our notes or whatever. Which a lot of times I tell people, if you're a person that do all your notes on one day or one evening or in a time frame or whatever, trying to make sure you're doing it in the workday would be better. If you work for yourself, definitely, be able to create good time management with that, and time constraints that you would be doing, things in certain time periods, and then you're off to resting, off to being with the family, or off to an evening out or something like that. So you want to make sure that you're, really taking care of yourself. So I guess I'm probably talking more on the side of taking care of yourself. Yes. But again, we do have a lot that goes on. We get snappy sometimes with people when we feel that we're getting burnt out, or we start to sleep more, eat more. We start to do things that we know triggers certain things with us, and we have to be very mindful of what triggers certain things. With me, I like to tell people, I know when an episode of anxiety, or an episode of depression, or an episode of just me being just bouncing off the wall. I call it sometimes ADHD or something like that. I know when something's getting ready to happen, and because I start to feel a certain way. And as you become more versed in the field of counseling, you will become like that as a therapist and as a counselor, because you will realize that, oh, I'm feeling this way again. Oh, maybe I'm getting ready to, dip into a low phase, or a high energy phase, or whatever it is I'm getting ready to dip into. I get ready to go into overdrive or something like that. So I have to make sure, as you're learning yourself, you'll make sure that you're focusing, like I do. I make sure that I'm focusing on taking care of myself. I mean, a lot of things I do for self-care is simple stuff that doesn't even cost me money. I make sure I take a 20-minute bath every day, try to just relax and rejuvenate myself, kind of, fuel myself up for what's next to come. I try to make sure I take the pressure off of doing things like, I tell people, brushing your teeth for 2 minutes. You won't believe how many people probably don't brush their teeth for 2 minutes, but I take it upon myself to brush my teeth for 4 minutes, because I want to make sure not only that I'm keeping my good hygiene in there, my teeth hygiene, but I'm also making sure that I'm taking my time and I'm not rushing through my morning routine. So that's something that I do to keep, and I know people like 4 minutes, really? Yeah, 4 minutes is a lot, but 4 minutes is good to make make sure that I'm really brushing my teeth thoroughly, doing all the dental regimens that I have set up for myself to make sure that my teeth stay, attached to my head for a very long time as I'm getting older. So that's something real simple. The other things that I try to do is make sure that I get a workout in every day. I try to roll my back on a foam roller just to relax the tension in my back. I do things like that. Um, I roll my feet across little tennis balls just to make sure that I'm getting a good, release in my feet muscles and all the, ligaments in your feet and things like that. So there are a lot of things that I do. I do stretch my neck a lot, just stretching my neck from side to side, up and down. Um, those are all fitness type things. I make sure that at least 2 to 3 nights a week, if not more, because sometimes I do it more nights a week. I will go to bed at 6:30, 7 o'clock. That is to help me rejuvenate and regain my focus and being in tune with everything that's happening and going on. I tend to like to make sure that I eat pretty decent. I like to have a lot of fruits and things like that. So that's another self-care part of it. I do a lot of affirmations. I do meditations and things of that nature as well. But those are things that help you definitely be able to manage through a lot of the symptoms of counselor burnout and fatigue, compassion fatigue. Another thing too is like to communicate with my supervisees, since I'm the clinical supervisor. I always talk to them about different things, like I just mentioned, but I also talk to them about, being assertive and being firm and just, and making sure that they're taking care of themselves and making sure that they're putting themselves first, because they wouldn't be able to help all the clients that they help, their family, their husband, their children, family members and things like that. They wouldn't be able to do any of this thing without them being at, optimum peak performance. So I always try to inform my supervisees and my interns about things like that, as well as my students. So those are, good things. And like I said, I just wanted to put this out there so that we could talk a little bit more about topic 3, discussion question number 2 for week 3. This is in the Grand Canyon University course that I am teaching. And that course is the the foundations of addiction and substance use disorders. Again, that's the foundations of addiction and substance use disorders with Grand Canyon University. So this is just a little some tips for when you're answering the question, talking about when faced with symptoms of counselor burnout and or compassion fatigue. What support would you seek in communicating with your clinical supervisor? So what are the things you would want to start and talk about with your clinical supervisor? What are the things that you really want to be able to get out there and hope to get some good feedback from your clinical supervisor? Again, focusing on timing, focusing on all those things that help you to make sure you stay focused and on point, and even taking some downtime, and whether it be a day off from work or a week off from work. Those are some things that can be communicated about, and I'm sure your clinical supervisor will be able to give you some great ideas and things of that nature. So until the next time, we will definitely be back with some other weekly discussions. So stay tuned. Thanks.